Hey there, biology students. We are going to work through the second part of chapter 3 today. So there's a lot of diagrams in this second part. So make sure you watch this video. If you have trouble, you can always go back and rewatch parts. But a lot of diagrams, a lot of visuals here. So, all right. The second part of the chapter here talks about how energy flows in ecosystems, and energy flows through an ecosystem basically in a one-way stream. And we'll look at a couple ways that happens, the one-way stream. So the first, most simplified way to understand that, and I know you guys have all used this terminology in school before, is a food chain. And a food chain is a series of steps in which organisms transfer energy by eating and by being eaten. Okay, so here's an example of one. We have a four-step food chain in this diagram where we have a producer, looks like some sort of a tree, like an oak tree, primary consumer, which would eat a producer. So primary means first. This would be a caterpillar. And then a songbird, which would eat the caterpillar, is called a secondary consumer. And then tertiary, which means three, would be a consumer, third step. So we have a some sort of a hawk or a predatory bird eating the songbird. Okay, food chains can be different than 4 steps. They can be 3, 4, or 5 steps, but typically you don't get any more than about 5 steps. So top one here, we see a 3-step chain. Corn is eaten by a rat, and the rat in turn is eaten by an owl. 4-step one, we have carrots eaten by a rabbit. Fox eats the rabbit. Lion eats the fox. And then the 5-step one at the bottom, we have grass, which is eaten by a grasshopper, which a frog consumes the grasshopper. A python might eat a frog, and an eagle could eat a python. Now, there are some problems with food chains, and as you can see here, we have eagles here, right? But we don't have pythons here. So the inaccuracy here is showing that all eagles don't eat pythons, and eagles don't eat only pythons. Okay? So a more complete view of this is called a food web. And a food web is just a bunch of food chains intertwined. Okay? And the reason that that is more accurate is because most animals do eat more than one kind of food. You know, there are some that only do eat one kind of food primarily, but many animals eat a wide variety of foods and are taking advantage of anything they can find. So here we have a food web, and when we look at a food web, this one is nicely, I like how this one's organized because it gives us levels, okay? So we have our producers and our decomposers are basically what you guys would call our plant life, okay? You know, plants, seeds, fruit, and so on. Here we have our primary consumers. These are the ones that are your herbivores, okay? Ones that eat primarily plants, like a mule deer. We have a squirrel, frog, nuthatch. Secondary consumers would eat the primary consumers. So these would be your animals you'd call like a predator, I guess. Okay. A marten, which is kind of like a large weasel animal. Some birds, some lizards, and then we have our tertiary consumers, which eat the secondary consumers. Okay, and that isn't saying that these top consumers, like a coyote, would never eat a pika or a squirrel, because they would. Okay, so you can see a couple of lines here going from like the deer up to the mountain lion and up to the coyote. So there are sometimes some levels, basically, that can be skipped. Okay, so when they draw it like this, which is a little seems a little more less organized. Sorry to confuse you there. but we see the lines drawn from, for instance, a krill here. We can see a krill eats phytoplankton, but the krill can be eaten by a fish. It can be eaten by a large whale. A penguin here could be eaten by a seal or a killer whale. And so we get all these interactions that actually occur, and this is a more accurate depiction of nature. Okay, and here's another food web that shows how decomposers can fit into the mix. Remember, do not forget about them. They are very important. So as we see, you might go, wow, I'd love to be at the top of that food chain, right? Okay, you're unstoppable. If you're a red-tailed hawk, you're not unstoppable. The red-tailed hawk eventually will cease to exist, but that doesn't mean that it's not used, okay? Decomposers and bacteria will actually feed upon that and put those things back into the system. Simple chemical compounds. We see molecules there and chemistry type words. Okay, so there is a cycle to things, and that's what we're going to look at next. All right, trophic levels are basically a way to kind of rank or understand how the energy flows within those steps of the food chain. So it's not just listing what eats what or what gets eaten by what. It's actually looking at how the energy stacks up. So we actually have three kinds of ecological pyramids, or ways to show a trophic level, okay, or a step in that food chain. And there are three pyramids, okay, and the naming is very easy. So we have pyramids of energy, pyramids of biomass, and pyramids of numbers. Okay, and you should understand what the word energy means. I'm not even going to question if you know what the word number means. Biomass, maybe that one will need some clarification on. So let's take a look at these. So here's a pyramid of energy, okay? And we start at the bottom of the pyramid, just like if you were actually building a pyramid, okay? And notice the base of the pyramid is bigger, okay? And so this shows us our plant life, okay? Our producers, those that make energy or create their own food, harness the energy of the sun to create their food, right? Photosynthesis. All right. And we see the word 100% word. We see the number 100% here, okay? That's showing us we're starting with 100% of the energy in the rainforest, which was achieved by photosynthesis. And we want to look at how much of that energy gets carried on to the next layer, okay? And you'll notice here that we lose a lot of energy, don't we? Okay? We go from 100% down to 10%. 90% of that energy gets used in that layer, or in that level, okay? Think about all of these living things. A crocodile, a monkey, even insect larvae, trees. A lot of that energy is used to do monkey things, okay? Swinging from vines, or making noise, or staying warm, or looking for a mate, or hiding from enemies, or looking for food, or taking care of their offspring. So this is why we only get a certain number of levels in a food web or a food chain, okay? Because when we get to that crocodile, we get to the very top of that trophic level, there's really not much energy left for another level, okay? And so we can max out at about 4 or 5 layers to most food chains. Here shows it again, okay? This shows it in terms of measurement, joules, if you remember from 9th grade, learning about joules in energy. So we have 1,000,000 joules of sunlight, 1/10 basically is transferred on to the next level, or 90% has been used. Okay, so now we're at 10,000 joules in the producers. Out of that 1,000,000 joules, out of that 10,000 joules, 1,000 joules stored in the primary, then 100, and finally 10. And so we just kind of run out of juice, basically. Now, biomass. Bio means life. Mass means how much of something there is, right? Substance. So here it's just kind of like taking a measurement of the animals in an area or the organisms in an area. If we had 900 kilograms of grass, that could sustain 100 kilograms of mice, which could sustain 50 kilograms of snakes, but only 10 kilograms of owls. So notice each layer we get less total mass. And if you think about the organisms involved, it looks like they're getting a little bit bigger. With less mass and bigger animal, we have less numbers. Okay. And so that follows along too. So really all of this is showing the same info. It's just a different aspect. So in a lake, for instance, we could have, 10,000 shrimp, which could sustain 1,000 bleak. Think of a minnow, which could sustain 100 perch, which 100 perch could sustain 10 pike, and maybe that would sustain 1 osprey. If you don't know what an osprey is, it's kind of like a water eagle. It's a predatory bird that feeds on fish. If you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, little tidbit, Seattle Seahawks is actually an osprey bird logo. Seahawks is another name for an osprey. All right, last little section here, and I only have a few minutes, so we're going to kind of move fast here. What elements make up living things? So whether it's a human body, a squirrel, a plant, some main elements make up living things. So here's the symbols: oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen. S is sulfur. P is phosphorus, right? Okay. These make up compounds such as water, carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and proteins. Ding, ding, ding. Remember that? That is the macromolecules we learned at the beginning of the year, right? Okay. We don't manufacture these. We don't use them up. All these things basically are conserved and recycled. Okay. In biological, geological, chemical, physical, and human ways, such as the water cycle. Okay. I'm not going to go through everything here. I'll probably just add that to your assignment, trying to figure out, what some of these mean. Phase changes from gas to liquid and solid to liquid or solid to gas. Okay, I'll let you look some of those up since we only have 2 minutes left on video. Okay, carbon cycle. Carbon is a big part of living things. So fossil fuels, oil, coal, natural gas, these are actually remnants of past living life, past plant life and animal life, which we use. There's a lot of energy stored in there. We can use them for things like driving our cars or running factories. CO2 is put back into the air, which of course then is taken in by plants through photosynthesis to give off oxygen. So carbon cycle is an important cycle there. Here's another picture. You could pause that to look. It has a little more information, especially geological ways we can recycle carbon, like in volcanoes, forest fires, things of that nature. So feel free to pause the video and look at some of those. And we also have the nitrogen cycle, okay, which probably is the least out of the three: water cycle, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, the least probably understood by kids. But basically, nitrogen, which is a huge part of what we need to survive, is found in plant life. And so if you eat plants or you eat animals, you get your nitrogen. But we need special bacteria called nitrogen-fixing bacteria to convert that nitrogen into the right form. Okay. All right. Okay, go ahead and complete the quiz, and we'll see you on Wednesday.